Well, and today, welcome Jesse Harless. How are you, Jesse?
I'm good, Maggie. Thank you for having me on. It's an honor to be on this podcast with you.
Well, thanks so much for being here. I can't wait to hear a little bit more about your story. Can you tell us the journey that kind of led you to what you're doing now? And what is it that you're doing now?
Yeah. So the journey for me is a journey of addiction. My life growing up, it's been a series of different types of there was more than just addiction, but I really like to point out the addiction to try to help others to see where sometimes it starts way earlier than you think. And for me, my first addiction was thumb sucking. That sounds really funny, but it was thumb sucking because thumb sucking was a coping mechanism for pain. And my father left at 4. He was an alcoholic and a drug addict, and he left at 4. And when he left, the fear of abandonment was placed there, and that fear would be there for many, many, many more years as I experienced that a few more times. But so sucking my thumb was a way to numb the pain in some ways, and I did that till I was about 8 or 9 years old every day, until the pain of or the fear of embarrassment became so great that I stopped. And so that was kind of the first one. And then the next kind of thing I latched onto was fantasy. My next addiction was fantasy, which was online games and pornography. And I was 11 years old when this began. And I tend to do things all in. So when I do something, I jump all the way in. And so I jumped all the way in those things. And again, that was just another way of numbing pain. And, I had a friend, my best friend moved away, another, fear of abandonment came back, and I just started isolating on the computer. And, the fear of intimacy, I'm sure, was there. And so, yeah. And then kind of to speed it up, that went all the way through high school. And then when I finally went to college, I'll spare you a lot of those details. I got into college and I found drugs and I found alcohol. And again, I'm an all-in type of person. I just jumped all in and I hit every jackpot imaginable in college. I got caught for plagiarism. I was arrested by a state trooper. I failed all my classes. So there was a lot of signposts early on. So those are, yeah. So, so that kind of led me into much harder drugs. I flunked out of college, and for me, it was a rapid progression. It didn't take 4 years, 10 years. It took like a few months, and I was jumping into cocaine and heroin. And part of that was my father actually passed away. So I came home one night, I found out my father had passed away, and it was my excuse to use cocaine for the first time. And I was just off and running. That was his drug of choice. That became my drug of choice. And I just ran my life into the ground. I didn't have to drink or drug 20 years. I had to do it a few years. And my life was in complete wreck until I found a way to order prescription medication myself, of course, illegally. So I was ordering synthetic opiates. And I did this for months and months. My addiction only got worse. And eventually I got caught. I thought I was untouchable, but I kind of intuitively knew better. And eventually I got caught, and I was 22 years old. I was facing federal felonies. So I was facing 2 federal felonies, 7 or 14 years in federal prison. And, that's when things changed. That's where the story really begins as far as where I changed everything around. I had 2 choices. It was to go all in and make recovery work, or it was to undoubtedly go to jail for a long time in federal prison. So that really, really, and I realized that everyone's journey is different. It doesn't have to be that extreme to find recovery. But for me, that was the turning point.
That was the actual defining moment that led you to get clean and sober at
Absolutely.
22.
Yep. At
wow.
22.
And so what did you do? How did you get sober?
Yeah. So my pretrial probation officer required me to go to meetings, and she required me to see a therapist. And so, and work full time. I didn't go to rehab. I didn't go to detox. I had none of that. My prescription from the judge was, you're going to work full time. You're going to, see this therapist, and you're going to attend recovery meetings. That was my prescription for sobriety, for recovery. And so that's what I did. And so what I started to do is I started to work with this therapist for the trauma, for the stuff that happened early on. I just dumped everything on her. And I, that's what I did in the beginning. And then what I did is I started to build a community in recovery. And then what I started to do was, and I think this is what has helped me today the most, is I started to implement new habits. And these habits were not only, obviously I changed my community, I changed my environment. I was improving my health because I wasn't using toxic substances. But what I really started to do is I started to practice new habits. Like the first habit that became number one was focus on my recovery. That became number one. Focus on it every day. That became number one. And then I started to, exercise my mind and body. So I started to exercise my mind with reading. I would read spiritual texts. I would do affirmations. This is like 2 months into my recovery. I started to do, I started to journal every day. I got a mentor my first month of recovery because I thought I might be suicidal because of just all the stuff that was happening. And I had this mentor, and he said to start to journal your journey. And I started doing that every day. And it's actually been 12 years. I have 12 years of journals. So I'm so grateful that man said that, because I still haven't stopped doing that today.
Yeah, it looks a little different pen to paper, doesn't it? It makes it more real, right? It's
yeah.
You can't avoid it. When we're in our thought process, it's easy to kind of snow ourselves into thinking, oh, it wasn't that bad. Yeah, it's okay. My story isn't that bad. Boy, that guy is worse. But when you put pen to paper and you actually physically see it in black and white, it's a whole different ballgame.
Absolutely. It becomes real. And that's reality. When I look back at my journals now, I'm like, oh my God, like I quickly forget how much stress, how much anxiety, how many obstacles I had to overcome to be today 12 years in recovery, in long-term recovery, and so it's really helpful. So anyone who's not journaling, I recommend they start journaling tonight.
Yeah. Well, I think for any of us, it's really helpful. I lead some silent retreats at my meditation community. And part of the process of our day of silence is to journal. And it's just a matter of getting out of your head. Your head is a very dangerous neighborhood. It is not a good place to hang out. It's much better to get it out of you. And I think too, when you journal, it loses its power. Some of that story loses its power.
Yeah, no question. There's so many you can Google search the therapeutic benefits of journaling. There's so many, but the bottom line is just do it. I tend to jump into things. People say, oh, well, there's all these benefits. I just start doing it, and then I figure out what the benefits are later. And so it's been very helpful. And so, and then another part of that process I did early on, and like I said, the first 2 months, 3 months, and then beyond, is I also started to take time for like silence, so I wasn't doing like a meditation practice yet. Now that's a huge part of my recovery. But at that time, it was more like, let's just pause. Let's just sit in silence for a little bit. And then prayer. Like these are things I was not doing before. And so that was another element of that connection to my creator early on. And so that was those are the things I did early on. I still do all of them today, magnified.
Yeah, well, it's super important to get still, to just be still and be in the present moment and just slow it all down, slow your physiology down, slow that thought process down, and reconnect to your innermost self for a change. We're all so crazy, busy, stressed, anxious, depressed. I don't think there's anybody in the world that isn't anxious at the moment about something. Right. And at least for me, of course, I'm the meditation lady, but at least for me, that saved my life. Really, truly, is just spending a half an hour twice a day in meditation, or whatever time you have. It doesn't have to be that much time.
Mm.
Just to stop. Because what other time during the day do you allow yourself the permission to just stop when you're not sleeping? We
Right.
don't. We don't. So what tangible ways can you tell us that you have grown and shifted in this journey towards your life illuminated?
Yeah, I mean, by doing those habits every day, about a year, so about a year from the time I had my arraignment, and essentially my sobriety date is December 18th, 2005. December 22nd, 2005, I was arraigned in federal court. And then January 2007, I was told I wasn't going to prison. So I didn't spend a day in prison, which is a miracle. So I'm still very grateful for that.
Wow. Mm-hmm.
And so when that happened, I realized like, well, something's working. I don't know if it's the prayer. I don't know if it's the taking time for myself. It doesn't matter. I'm just going to keep doing them all. And so I just continued to do those habits. And what happened was, I said, hey, you know what? I'm going to go back to school. I was doing really well at my job. I was in sales. And I said, I'm going to go back to school. So I ended up going back to school, finishing that degree that took like 9 years. But I finished the undergrad degree in psychology. And then what I did is, because I had the felonies, I had this limited belief. And the limited belief was that because of that, I was very limited. My choices were very limited. And little did I know that was not true at all. There was many avenues that I could take, and many that I discovered later on. But at the time, I said to myself, I have to stay in this job. I can't leave this job, because if I go out into the marketplace, they're going to deny me because of the felonies. But, once I finished my degree, I said, you know what, I bought my first home. And that was really significant, because my whole life I grew up in apartments, and when we had a home, we lost it. When I was 4, we lost that home due to addiction. So it was really important milestone for me to buy this home. And, now it was paying for the home. And so what I had to do was get out of my comfort zone. So I applied to a Fortune 15 company, and I put down my felonies, and I had the first phone interview, and they said, hey, we're glad you have your degree and you're doing great, blah, blah, blah. But they're like, tell us about the arrests. And so what I did is I told them everything. I told them every detail. I mean, I told them about my using. I told them about my recovery. I left nothing out. And so I had a second phone interview, and they said, hey, we're great, all your accomplishments, but let's talk about your arrests. I told them everything again. And on the third interview, I got the job.
Wow.
And so when that happened, I felt limitless, and I knew that nothing could stop me, because it just didn't seem conceivable I could have a job at this company.
Well, it's interesting because, part of the programs, any 12-step program, are about the ability to be honest with yourself and others. And sometimes I think that's tricky, because we want to be honest, but then there's the fear of the honesty and where that's going to take us. And you just, like you said, most of the time you're all in when you're in. So my guess is you just, hey, I'm all in. I got nothing to hide.
Exactly. It's just a mentality that I've had, and it's good and bad, right? It's good and bad, the all in mentality. And,
but the honesty, right? I mean,
yeah, the honesty piece is key. Yeah.
Because what if you got the job and you had never told them that, and then they found out?
Exactly. And that was my thinking.
Yeah.
And that was my thinking, was
that you would have been fired after you had been hired.
Exactly. So I figured if I tell them everything and they hire me, they can do nothing. They hired me knowing every detail of my past. I had nothing to hide. And trust me, on that first call, I was very hesitant. I'm like, I don't know. And then something just told me, tell them everything. And
why not?
I'm so glad I did. And, because once I was in, I'm like, I'm in. There's no kicking me out now. And so once I was in, I ended up excelling rapidly. I won the highest award they have possible, which was a paid trip to Switzerland for 5 days, all expenses paid trip. I met the president and vice president of the company. It just became a wild dream. And I took my best friend, who I met in recovery, with me to Switzerland to make it real. And, things like that continue to occur. And yeah,
miracles do happen, right?
Exactly.
And I think it comes down to just your truth, being honest and just saying what there is to say, full disclosure. Take me as I am. And if you don't, that's fine too.
Mm-hmm.
I love
100%.
it. I love it. So what is the philosophy that you live by now and what guides your life?
Yeah, I mean, what guides my life today is it's really the connection I have to my creator, to my heart. That literally guides my life. And the way I tap into that is through, like you said, meditation. So I kind of tap into, I read lots of spiritual texts and different things, and those really help me. But it's really my self-care. I call it radical self-care, and I don't mess around with that. Every morning, I spend at least an hour on my self care, and what that looks like, it's pretty much a morning routine. But that helps me connect to my source, my heart, and that's what guides me more than anything else. I can read all the books in the world, but if I'm not happy and if I'm on, if all that knowledge is not landing, then it's really useless. So for me, it's really getting connected with myself, that quiet voice and that intuition.
Right.
That's really what guides me.
Yeah. And who do you think influenced your life path or has been your greatest role model?
Yeah, I've had a few. My first was my brother, because I didn't have a father. It was my mother, and my mom obviously was a huge role model, raising three boys on her own, lots of struggle, and she stayed strong to continue to work. So she was a role model showing me resilience. And that was a huge skill that would pay off dividends in recovery. And I'd say my brother also was a huge role model of how to treat people with compassion, how to be respectful, and how to have relationships. Like, I didn't know how to do that. I mean, even in recovery, I was like, how do I do this? I had no idea how to have relationships. It took many years in recovery to learn how to have a relationship. And
So
so I
I think,
learned.
don't you think that in our drinking days or using days or what have you, that we end up getting stunted at whatever age we started all that?
Absolutely.
So it
No
would
doubt
make
about it. Mhm.
sense that you didn't know how to be in relationship and how to have a relationship because you were too busy getting high and whatever it is you were doing when those lessons could have been learned, right?
Yeah, 100%. And if I really was to be honest, it was 11 years old when it was stunted. That's when it really started. So I'm talking 11 to 22, and I had no real experience of how to have a healthy relationship. So
Yeah. Yeah, I can totally see that. So now what are you doing? You're entrepreneurs in recovery. What does that look like? What are you doing?
yeah, so last year I I was in that same job that I worked all those years to be in, and I got to a place where I felt like I was burning a lot of energy to build someone else's dream versus my own. And there's nothing wrong with that. But I just had something in my soul, a fire in my belly that told me that I could do this on my own. And so I started to surround myself with people, entrepreneurs, who were doing it on their own. And I was like, if they can do it, I mean, I know I can at least pay the bills. I'll figure it out. So I wrote down, so I actually had a experience where a mentor of mine, Hal Elrod, who wrote The Miracle Morning, we talked about, you know, having like a platform. And so in meditation, actually, I came out of a meditation and this name, Entrepreneurs in Recovery, came to me. And so I searched it. I couldn't find anything. And I said, maybe this is my platform. And so that was in April of last year. And then I decided to set a date to leave my 9 to 5 job. And I was doing this with, not a lot of savings, no one in my family are entrepreneurs. I didn't have any business plan. I just mind mapped the business that I thought might work. And I set a date of August 30th, 2017 is when I'd leave the job. And as the date approached, interestingly enough, these ideas of like, hey, I should sell my house and use that money to help me to launch this business, and all these ideas that I didn't even think of when I first had the idea, that it wasn't there, And in time, these ideas came. And so I left my job August 25th, 2017. And I started Entrepreneurs in Recovery. And that's just a way to kind of show you that I didn't have it all figured out. Okay. I trusted my intuition again, and I left. And so Entrepreneurs in Recovery is it's a platform to elevate the lives of people in recovery who want to reach their full potential. That's really a basic description, because what I find is that a lot of people, and this is maybe in life, but especially in recovery, are lost, stuck, and lack direction. And all they need is some clarity and vision in order to live a life on purpose. So that's my mission behind Entrepreneurs in Recovery. And I do that through I do it through coaching. So I coach individuals through that process. Not only do my habits that I've been doing daily, but through discovering their vision, discovering their strengths, their unique superpowers, and how can they serve the world with those, or even their job that they're in now. But that's typically, so it's, Entrepreneurs in Recovery coaching is really what I'm focusing on today to have a direct impact on people. But Entrepreneurs in Recovery, the bigger picture as a platform, is going to be a place where people can go to get education, to hire a coach, to have video, to have media that will help to benefit their life so that they can take that first step and know that they're not alone. Like I was like, who's an entrepreneur in recovery? And I started to research that. Yeah, like you're an entrepreneur in recovery. So I said, well, why don't I talk to these people who are entrepreneurs in recovery and learn how they did it? They were obviously struggling at one point. So how did they get to the other side? How did Maggie get to this place where she has a podcast? I want to know the backstory. And then I want to know the first steps. Did you get a mentor? Was it a coach? How did you get to this place? That was another inspiration. So eventually I might have my own podcast where I do that, Entrepreneurs in Recovery podcast. But that could be in the near future. But that's what I do. I look for those entrepreneurs in recovery and I reach out to them, and then I start to learn from them. And that's what I'm doing today is I'm actually working with Genius Recovery with Joe Polish, who's an entrepreneur in recovery, and I'm helping him with his Facebook group and help to grow that. That's part of kind of a collaboration, I would say, between Entrepreneurs in Recovery and what he's doing in his moonshot.
That's awesome. And I read somewhere in your bio, there's something in there about a phrase called appreciative inquiry. So can you enlighten me what that means?
Yeah. So appreciative inquiry is the easiest way to define it is a search for the best of what was, what is, and what could be. That's really a simple definition.
Nice.
But it's a way. So how I use appreciative inquiry, I was actually trained and certified in what's called LEAF certification. And that LEAF certification enabled me to go into treatment centers and sober living facilities and facilitate a 60-minute group of exploring someone's high point story, exploring their strengths, their unique gifts, and then creating a vision for their life, like a 5-year vision. And then how are they going to implement that 5-year vision? What's the action plan? All within 60 minutes. And I use that with a framework that's inside of appreciative inquiry. And so that's like a really high level, what I do and what appreciative inquiry is. I could go a little deeper if you'd like, but that's kind of the high level of it.
So what kinds of people do you do coaching individually then, or do you have groups or?
Yeah, right now it's just individual coaching.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. So I coach individuals on a weekly basis. I like the weekly basis, the high touch point. And yeah, we just go through the things that are happening, what's most important to them. And yeah.
And so you go into these rehab facilities as well and spread your gift, it sounds like.
Yeah, I try to make it not about me. A lot of times when I go in there, if the CEO's there or whatever, they'll say, hey, share your story a little bit and then facilitate. But a lot of times people, it's not about me. So when I go in there, I'm just trying to go in and facilitate where I can get them to share their stories with each other. When you go into a 28-day rehab and you're having the people there who think they know each other or don't know each other, they get to know each other real quick when their partner's sharing their stories. And then I have them mapping out their strengths on whiteboards as groups. And then I guide them through a visualization where they write out a 5-year journey. I mean, they're looking at one day at a time, which it is, but I have them already looking early on at what could the future bring, meaning purpose, right?
Well, and hope, right?
Exactly. Hope.
Right. Somebody who's in one of those places doesn't have a lot of hope, I don't think, for the most part.
It's very true. It's very true, and that's why I love doing what I do, and it's really testing ground, trying all this. But I've been getting really good feedback, and I've been invited to a few places across the country to teach it. So it's really exciting. It's really right at the beginning. So.
Oh, I think it's awesome. I think obviously, since you didn't find that when you did your little Google search for entrepreneurs in recovery, obviously you found your niche.
Yeah, it certainly is a niche, and I am enjoying it. And really, it's been about 10 months, and I'm just getting started. You just kind of learn as you grow.
Yeah, that is for sure. That is for sure. I've had my own growing pains along the way. Oh, and what is a great little tidbit or big piece of advice you can leave us with that, anyone listening to Life Illuminated?
Yeah, I would say to use fear as a compass. Fear held me back big time, and fear had been there all along. So if you're feeling fear, fear to, get to reach out and ask for help, or fear to, get that promotion at work, or fear to leave the job, whatever it is let fear be the compass, and trust that fear, and then tell someone about that fear that you have that will help you and guide you into that next phase of your life. So don't look at fear as a negative thing. Look at it as a way that's telling you where you need to go next.
The catalyst. Yeah. I love that. That's great. Yeah. So what else are you doing? I heard you're writing a book. You're about to publish a book. You've already written a book. What's the story there?
Yeah, so I did write a really short book about cold showers, and I never released it because I'm still looking to expand it, because I've been taking straight cold showers for 2.5 years.
Why?
Well, someone actually introduced me to them, and I said the same thing. It was December in New Hampshire, and I'm like, there's no way I'm taking a cold shower. It doesn't make any sense. And my roommate at the time took one right when that person said that. So I said, all right, I'll try it. And I tried it. And that first time it was very cold. But what happened was I came out and I had about 2 hours of euphoric energy. I was like on this, it was actually strange. I felt like I was sober, but I felt high. And it was because I must have had some dopamine release. But I've always struggled with anxiety, and I've always struggled with other behavioral addictions, even in recovery. And when I started to take these cold showers, not only did my anxiety reduce dramatically, my confidence and my discipline skyrocketed. And so there could be more to do with my success to cold showers than many other things. And that's why it's something, before I release the book, I want to go a little deeper on the research on it. And there's not a lot of research, unfortunately. There's a lot of opinions. And that's what my book is an opinion. But it's based off my experiences. And there's plenty of people who do cold showers, and famous people, Tim Ferriss. And so, so why cold showers? It helps me overcome destructive habits, behavioral addictions. It helps me, increases my energy. It changes my state immediately. I don't care what state I'm in. If I jump in a cold shower, it's going to change my state. So,
I'm in California, and there's a couple of little places down the street that actually offer cryotherapy, right? Where you get in this vat of coldness. And now you've got me thinking, because it would never have occurred to me to get into one of those things, a vat of cold water. I'm cold when it's 70 degrees. So the idea of being cold does not do it for me. But you actually have me thinking twice.
Yeah, I usually get people to at least think about it. And, you can start with warm. Here's something very interesting. I read this yesterday. This guy, I don't remember his, I'm not going to do him justice to remember his name, but he said that, so I used to tell people warm to cold showers, and that's even in my book, and I've been only taking straight cold. And he says taking a warm to cold shower is like eating junk food and then following up with healthy food. That's what he says.
Okay.
And,
so halfway.
that might be extreme. And I know there's studies about hot to cold showers that are out. So I would say, try it with the hot to cold first. And then eventually when you have the confidence, just try a cold shower for 2 minutes and try it out. And there's methods, it's in my book, like ways to like prime yourself to get ready to take it and what to do when you're in the shower. But
okay. Well, that's interesting. That's fascinating, actually.
Yeah.
So what else do you have to add to our podcast that listeners are interested in? Or what else, what other things can we glean from you right now?
Well, I just want to mention there is a book coming out called The Miracle Morning for Addiction Recovery. And that book was written by, Hal Elrod, Joe Polish, and Anna David. And it's a really, really good book to start with on your recovery journey. Or if you're 20 years into recovery, it's a good book to start with because it tells you how, if you win the morning, you win the day. And it's a really powerful book written by people who are in recovery, Joe and Anna. And it's just, I would say to check that out. It comes out soon. It comes out June 25th. And so check that out. And I'll have my own book out too that will highlight all the habits that I've implemented, and it will even talk about the Miracle Morning. Hopefully that comes out the end of the summer. But yeah, I'm also working on my own book to share my story and to share the habits that have helped me over the last 12 years.
Oh, that's great. It's awesome. And where can people find you?
Yeah, so they can go to entrepreneursinrecovery.com. They can also go to my name, jesseharless.com, to learn more about what I'm doing and about Entrepreneurs in Recovery. And they can also send me an email, jesse@jesseharless.com. And yeah.
Awesome. Now, just one last question for you. What suggestions do you have for anyone out there who's listening and really struggling or feeling stopped from living a life that they love?
Yeah, if you're struggling and you're in that spot, just know that you're not alone. That even now with 12 years of recovery, I still struggle. There's days where I have extreme self-doubt and anxiety, physical anxiety, panic attacks that I can feel. And that if you're in that spot, to ask for help, reach out and talk to someone about it. And you can reach out to me if you want. Reach out to someone, ask for help. That there's help available, and a life that you can only have ever dreamed of is available to you. And I can give you many examples of that, of people who have done it. So,
oh, that's wonderful. Well, I've thoroughly enjoyed having you on Life Illuminated today, Jesse, and I hope that you come and visit us again soon.
Absolutely. Thank you, Maggie, for having me on your podcast. I appreciate it.
All right.